Hi friends. So it's been a while since I have posted a video here on YouTube, and part of that's because we, in kind of a spur of the moment, had to travel across the country, and it seems like, you know, when something like that comes up, you have to you have to catch up on work, which required a lot more travel. So Shauna and I have really kind of been on the road pretty much for several weeks, and we finally have gotten back home. So we've driven between the continental divides and back. So we left here. We drove all the way out to Colorado. We went to a place called Buena Vista, or, you know, depending on where you're from, they call it different. In Colorado, they just say BV. If it's Virginia, they call her Buena Vista. And if you're in Florida, they just call it Disney World. In any case, it's a beautiful place up in the Colorado mountains. And so we went up there, and it's a long drive. I mean, we went through Tennessee, Missouri, all the way across Kansas. We actually ran out of gas in the Great Plains. I think it might have been the Colorado side of the plains, but it was, we ran out of gas. That was fun. I always say, you know, whenever you stop, just fill up the tank, even if it's just for a restroom break, because sometimes when you're traveling cross country, you can end up in areas where you go for like ever without seeing an exit with a gas station. I don't even know how people live out there. On our way back, we kind of went through a different part of Colorado to pay some respects to some long since deceased family members, and we cut up from that town in Colorado into Kansas back up to I-70, and I don't think that there was anything for miles. I mean, it was dark, but I didn't see anything, not even lights for miles. Off in the distance, you could see lights that looked like a city, but it was probably like a feed elevator or some sort of farming operation. But it was an interesting trip, beautiful trip. We saw a lot of things. We experienced a lot of different weather, and then after we got back here in North Carolina, we actually had to get back in the car and head down to Georgia to do a film that we've been working on called Why Brahmin with the Eastern Brahmin Breeders Association. And that was an exciting, that was fun to go out there and film. It makes me happy when we go and we visit a large-scale ranch that believes in animal welfare and holistic management practices, and that's something that I'm going to talk a little more about on our channel going forward, because that's important. But then we went from there up to the North Carolina mountains, so our work kind of takes us all over the place. The reason why we went to Colorado was not work related. We had a family tragedy involving a younger family member in his 20s. He was a bull rider, a really great guy. And, you know, sometimes when you face these tragedies, it brings up a lot of questions. And I wanted to talk about this with you guys because 2020 has been no stranger to tragedies for families around the world. Between the coronavirus, the fires in Australia, floods in New Zealand, the locust outbreaks, we've also had, you know, the airliner shot down in Iran, soldiers injured from bombings on one of our bases there. I mean, there's just been, it seems like, you know, many tragic events. And so I think a lot of people are probably facing, you know, these feelings of tragedy. There's a lot of people out there talking about, you know, we're seeing plagues, we're seeing pandemics, and I'm going to catch up on a lot of those things. I'm going to talk about, you know, the coronavirus in a future video, and some of those other things that are going on and how to handle that. The media loves to skew stuff. You know, so we'll go over some of the facts and things of those situations. The locust situation is also a very big one that's not getting a lot of media attention, but should. But in this video, I want to focus on tragedy for a moment because, you know, it seems like when things like this happen, something unexpected happens. We tend to start questioning a lot of different things. We start to question our faith. We start to, you know, ask a bunch of questions. Why? And one of the questions that came up in our travels around our situation was, well, where did they go? What happens to them next? And there are a lot of people who would interpret Bible studies to say, well, you either go to heaven or hell. And I think it's important to remember that the Bible is something that is often, it's like playing a game of telephone over the years. Things get construed and changed. None of us really know what happens after death. And this is something that I was thinking about, because when I go out and travel, one of the things that I like to do in my own spare time is go out and film wildlife. I love wildlife. I love observing wildlife. I think that's part of the reason why I love it when I get to talk about holistic management practices on farms, because it's a method and a theory that really helps reinvigorate our natural ecological cycle and embrace the biodiversity that we bring to a farm with livestock, with the natural wildlife, and building responsible habitats. But I love wildlife. It's one of the things, even on our own farm, I like to go out, right before we left, I was out in the woods on our stream filming a bunch of turtles and a snapper. I got a nice hawk up in the tree. And then, when you go to different places, you get the opportunity to see animals that you don't normally get to see. Like, we have a lot of whitetails here in North Carolina. Out there in BV, they've got a ton of mule deer, and they're so easy to photograph, so easy to film, because they're all over the place. I went out one morning. Every time I go there, I'm in search of cougars. It is funny because I'll find, a place where I find tracks and I'll find scat. I went out one day, it was snowing, and I went up into the mountains by myself, and I found a nice quiet place, and I got out and was looking around, and I found what looked like fresh cougar tracks, and I kind of started following them along, and I found some scat. And I remember just sitting there looking at the scat going, oh, this is cool, there must be a cougar nearby. And then I realized that the snow was melting on the scat, which means that it was still warm, which unfortunately I chickened out and went back to the car. But I've always been out there in search of something. And one morning I went out in search of elk, because normally the elk in BV just come out into the fields in the morning and they're grazing. There was a lot of snow on the ground, so they may have been staying up into the woods. I didn't find any elk, but I did on one of the roads I took up into the mountains. I think I was heading up towards Cottonwood Lake, and I saw a moose. Unfortunately though, by the time I got the camera out and on the moose, it ran into the woods and disappeared. That big of an animal disappeared literally before my eyes. I didn't even see how there were enough trees for that thing to disappear. So it didn't turn into my best videography moment. But anyway, the point of this is that when you observe animals and you watch life develop, like on a farm, we recently had chicks. That's another video I'm going to do as an update, is talk about raising chicks on the farm. But one of the things that I've noticed about all of these animals and predators and herbivores, all these animals, something they all have in common is that when they first come into the world, and we have this in common too, we experience certain natural instincts or natural capabilities, things that are naturally a part of us. We come into the world with love, we come into the world with compassion. We don't have fear, we have curiosity. We don't have passion, we have compassion. We don't have hate, we have love. We have all these things that are natural to us, and then everything else we learn along the way. So when we go out and we start to experience the world, we discover fear. We discover that as a reaction to things that happen to us. We discover hate because we learn what it feels like to have our feelings hurt or have our opinions stomped on. Compassion, something that is a direct line to us, something that we feel between our loved ones from the moment we're born, starts to turn into things like passion, where our opinion starts to drive those feelings, or those feelings are modified by opinion. And politicians know this. They know this very well. So do advocacy groups. They know how to drive those natural instincts of people into inserting opinions to influence those natural abilities to care. And that's why I think we have so much discontent between political parties and everything else. But those are the natural things. They're all good things. Love, compassion. they're great things, and then as we go through life and experience, we develop all the bad stuff. The bad stuff doesn't actually exist when we're born. Because I'm going to bring this up because I know some people are going to be like, well, what about the baby's born this way or that way? Our son was born 3 months premature. If you watch some of the videos on our page, Reconstructing Spirit Hill, it talks about us building our farm and the challenges we went through. One of the big challenges that we went through was our son being born premature. And medically speaking, it was an impossible situation. When he was born, I remember going back into the NICU, and they had him, hooked up to all this stuff. And the doctor said to me, your son is sick, but he doesn't seem that way right now. And the reason why is because he hasn't learned that yet. And I just kind of looked at the doctor and I said, so you're saying that he's born with this condition, but he doesn't actually recognize it. So he's acting normal and breathing normal, but once he realizes it, he's going to start showing the symptoms of it. And the doctor said that's correct. They have to learn that they have the condition, and then, we have to work through it. And I thought this is the most remarkable thing that I have ever heard coming from, somebody in the medical practice, was that we have to learn about our sicknesses. We have to learn about our illnesses. And it goes back to the same thing. When we are born, when we are created, when he was born, he knew nothing. And then it all began to, fall on him and be, the challenges came. And challenges are good. I mean, I think that there is a certain point to where as we grow in life and we go through challenges and we learn things, we rediscover those core attributes of ourselves that we were given with a greater sense of appreciation than we ever have before, because we recognize how awesome we were at that very moment in time when all we knew was love, good health, curiosity, compassion. So the challenges and tribulations that we go through are all absolutely necessary. I'm not putting those down at all. What I am saying is that it's not really a part of us. It's not really a part of our experience. It's all things that we learn, and then we learn to combat and we learn to overcome. And so when somebody was bringing up this question of death, there was a video of an Iranian boy talking about his father. And he said, I'm not going to stand up here and talk about the bad things because he wouldn't want that. If it was somebody else, he wouldn't stand up here and complain and talk about the bad things. And I think that that's important because when we think about somebody passing on, all of these challenges that we've learned in this life, all of these things that we've learned to be important to us, when we return to that natural state that we came with, that consciousness that we were born with, all of that doesn't matter anymore. All we can experience is love. All we can experience is compassion. And I do think that, consciousness is a part of spirit that is eternal. Jesus, for those of you who read the Bible, Jesus says that, when we pass on from this world, we become like angels with God. Some of these other things that we worry about don't matter anymore. And that's where I think, when these questions come up and we feel hurt and we feel like we're at a loss, what we can expect in the experience of those who have passed away is that those feelings of hurt, those feelings of loss, those feelings of inadequacy, those feelings of anything turmoil that they have learned throughout their life are no longer a burden to them. They don't matter anymore. I can't answer that, the question of whether or not they went to heaven or whether or not they're going to be reincarnated. I don't think anybody can actually answer that question, but what we do know is that as far as consciousness goes, at that final stage, we are back to where we started, which is a sense of peace and very good qualities that we are ultimately created with. So if you're dealing with tragedy and you're trying to reason through, what happened, what went wrong, why did this happen, find some comfort in knowing that all of these things that we've experienced in life, all of these tragedies, all of these things that we go through are no more than stepping stones. Your loss, the person that you have lost, was on those stepping stones and blocks as well, their own. their own path, and they've since moved on from that. They're at a completely different place than we are, wherever that is. But I guarantee you, it is instinctively and naturally better than what they may have experienced before. That's why, a lot of times you hear people say that they've passed on, they've moved on. They've moved on to this state of nativeness that they've lost over the years dealing with, with life, with situations. But I always have a different way of thinking about things, and I think that we all share that as well. We all have the ability to discover our own opinions and have our own thoughts. I think that's extremely important. I think it's a little discouraging that the world is so focused on making people think the same and see things the way that an elite few would like us to see things. But maybe what I said is helpful to you, maybe it isn't. I know for us, it's been hard to deal with a family tragedy, but we also recognize that we have to move on as well, and that their memory can only be a good one. When you move on from things, the memories become good. The bad memories always fade away, and what you're left with is just that goodness that you feel about them, that native sense that they were originally given is what we see about them. I'd say that's the truth about us. But anyway, so we'll be doing some more videos. We've got some, we've actually been working on several awesome production videos. The Eastern Brahmin Breeders Association has been working with us on a Y Brahmin video, which we've had the opportunity to film kind of all over North Carolina and all the way down into Georgia on. It's going to be an exciting video when that comes out. That'll be out soon. We filmed a bison ranch in the mountains, which I'm still working on getting that video done, and we'll get that out to you. And then of course my commentary videos, I've got a lot to catch up on. There's been a lot of things going on in 2020, and we just have been all over the place filming and gathering information. I will say that a conversation that I had in it was in Kansas, Oakley, Kansas, I was eating a continental breakfast at a Kansas, I think it was the Kansas Countryside Motel, and I had the opportunity to talk with a big grain producer from Nebraska, and what I heard from him just was shocking to me as far as from what we know from reading USDA reports. And it wasn't a bad conversation, but the information coming out of his mouth versus the information that we get from things like the USDA was so different, and so, well, let's just say there's a lot to talk about when it comes to grains, a lot to talk about when it comes to wheat, and then this locust situation in Africa has been a very big deal, and I'm going to do a video specifically on that because I'm going to explain to you guys why it's a big deal and how the current climate cycles that we're in are kind of feeding some of these things. They're feeding viral outbreaks, they're feeding the locust situation. And on that note, I'll also do a video just kind of giving you an update on some of the weather cycles. It's fairly interesting to look at the way that this winter has played out so far. Where I think we're heading into the spring and why that's going to matter, but also just the Arctic sea ice. You get a lot of misinformation on that, but I'm going to show you guys some research that shows you just exactly how this winter is shaped up, and why the spring and the summer we could expect to be a little cooler than normal. And obviously we're expecting to have some wet weather again in the Great Plains. So I'm going to do a lot of videos here to catch up over the next few days, and I appreciate your patience with us being gone for quite a while, but things happen, and family is always more important than work and YouTube. Of course, we consider all of our followers or friends as well. So stay tuned. I'll try and get some videos out a little more frequently over the next week.